the end of the day, I've been through enough where I know that for me and for my partners to be able to have a decent relationship is something that can flourish, is the ability to give them
Space.
the space to do those things, to hang out with a friends and whether it be guy or girls, really, to me, it don't make a difference, right?
just
I
know
have
some
I have
people are
enough
very-
trust. But yeah, there is, like I said, everybody's got their own
But
dynamic.
that's their boundary they set.
Exactly, for whatever reason.
Yes.
And that's a great that's a great way to segment into a boundary can start a conversation
Yes.
and start a communication that may be needed to understand the other person
Yes.
on why they're setting this boundary, why it's important to them. Just because they said it doesn't necessarily mean it's like, yes, you need to respect it for the fact that they're setting that, but you can have a conversation like, well, tell me like a little bit more about that. Like, why is that important
yeah.
to you?
Yeah.
Then guess what? You're actually communicating in a relationship.
Yeah,
You're actually
you're
growing with each other. You're
opening up. You're going deeper into your relationship to figure out why.
All right. Welcome everybody to another episode here at the Round Table. I'm here with my brother Dustin.
What's going on, man?
It's going good, man. What about you? We just caught up. I don't know.
It's been a long week. It's been an interesting week. If I sound funny or look kind of funny, I have tubes in my nose. I had surgery on Monday,
Yeah, and he still showed up, so
so
no excuses. But
yeah,
it's tough, man. I mean,
it's been interesting having them in. I'm over them. It's gonna be weird getting them yanked out of my nose.
yeah, bang. It's like
Yeah.
it's more like pulling a hair. Hopefully, you know?
Yeah. Man, try sneezing with your mouth open. It's very hard.
Oh my god.
I've only had to sneeze a few times, thank God, but try
Well-
sneezing with your mouth open. It's really hard.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
It's weird too.
Well, the thing too is like I feel like you were saying, you don't realize how
Oh,
much you use your nose when you eat or you move it. It reminds me of like during COVID, like when I was like, I don't realize how many times like I touched my face and like I remember like once I was at the store and I was like, I don't really want to get sick, so I'm like, how do I open these fucking bags, dude? Like, you know how you have to like,
Yeah.
you'd always lick them and like,
Yeah.
I was like, what do I do?
Pretty much. I mean, everything you do, you don't realize how much your nostrils move or adjust, or like take a drink is difficult, like eating's difficult, like this is a whole new adventure with these things, and I can't wait to get them out. Like, you can't blow your nose. And they're like, oh, just put some saline spray up there. I'm like, they don't fit. The tubes don't fit in each other. It just like drips down my face. Like, this is
It's a pain in the ass. Sounds like.
Yeah, it'll be nice on Tuesday when they yank them out.
So it's like a week. Is that what about it is?
Yeah.
A week healing process.
I think I probably could have got them out on Monday, but I opted for the latest appointment, so that's kind of my fault. But
Dang.
it's whatever.
Well, hopefully next week you'll
hopefully
be.
Hopefully it does what it needs to do, and
Then I'll be in here with some tubes in my nose.
Yeah.
So, because we have about the same thing. So
so far it's been worth it.
yeah.
I slept, but when I do get good sleep, I feel like I sleep a lot better.
And I think is that primarily what you did for, right?
Yeah,
Kind of improve
yeah.
sleeping quality. That's good, man.
But basically, I wasn't breathing through my nose, so I was breathing through my mouth all the time, and so that was causing me not to go into deeper sleep, I guess, because that's when you do. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. When you're sick, you don't sleep as well because you're breathing through your mouth when you got a really stuffy nose.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how allergies and all that stuff go after this too.
Yeah, because the assumption would be that you're breathing better, so
Yeah,
more allergies are capable, I guess, of.
or hopefully
being
they just don't
introduced.
exist anymore. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, that'd be great. I didn't have allergies, so I moved out to Utah.
Yeah,
That's interesting. But I didn't have them
it's
all
pretty terrible out here, from what I hear.
12 years, nothing. And then I get out here, 12, 13 years, and I get out here, and it's like,
I think we're a lot drier here than most places, so it makes sense.
it's that California air,
Yeah.
keeps you nice.
It's that ocean breeze,
All right, man. Well, let's jump into it, man. I don't want to keep you here too long, dude. I know that you showed up anyways, but I know that it's probably uncomfortable, and we'll get this through. So, what do we talk about today, man?
Boundaries.
Boundaries. How do we? All right. Well, I think this is a pretty straightforward topic, right? I think we all have kind of dealt with it. I know that boundaries are important. I can
They
tell you
are.
that. But I know that a lot of times they're difficult. They're difficult to understand them and how to.
I think they're really hard to set boundaries, especially depending on your situation, because you could be talking marital boundaries, you could be talking friendship boundaries, you could be talking family boundaries. Like and they all have their different set of difficulties. I mean, your marriage one, obviously, you're talking. You guys got to set boundaries so you understand where each other's uncomfortable zone is, which generally growing you need to be in an uncomfortable zone, but when you're in a marriage there's certain points where you can't grow past that just you need to have those boundaries.
Right.
And then you got friends where you got to set boundaries that you're not going to go do this or you're not going to deal with this in the friendship. And there's all sorts of different ones, and then family too, what you're going to tolerate, not tolerate from them. They all have their different set of difficulties.
Yeah, they all have their. You have to have a different dynamic for each of those different
Yeah.
categories of whether it be like you said the three that you mentioned there, and they
Yeah.
all have to be handled differently with care, right?
Yes.
Because boundaries, like you said, are hard to set because a lot of the times, at least for myself, it was more of those. I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings because I'm setting this boundary. I don't want to come across a certain way because I'm setting this boundary. Boundaries are for you,
Yes.
for you to protect yourself from whatever, whether it be negativity or whether it be in a marriage. For me, I'm gonna think of a boundary, I guess that we've set, which for myself, I don't really do well with physical altercations and stuff like that within marital. So if we start yelling or stuff like that, and then luckily Tay's not a person to like you can see it in different relationships. Somebody push somebody or something like that. More of a violent approach. Luckily Taylor's not that way, but that is a boundary that we had set in the beginning of our relationship. So even I say that to say this, like just because you don't see or demonstrate or see the effect of something that you don't want to happen, the boundary's there so that it never happens. So my boundary was like, hey, I don't do well with physical contact. I don't like that in relationships. That's a no go. Like if that ever happens, like
And physical contact, you're not talking like cuddling or holding hands. You're talking altercation, physical, just so everybody's clear. You're talking more on the violent side, like
exactly.
you said, pushing, shoving, hitting, slapping,
any of that,
things like that.
Yeah, that was a big boundary that I set in the beginning of our relationship. I was like, that's just not something that I'm comfortable with, and it's not something that I do, that I'm willing to put up with. Luckily, like I said, she's not that person anyways, but it was important for me to set that boundary up front because I think there is times where, in a relationship you get a little bit more comfortable and maybe a playful slap or like those things even to me, like they don't sit well with me. I think there's a lot of previous trauma from childhood all the way up to, just growing up in life. I don't like that. It's not how I play. That's not what I do. And so that boundary's always been set in our relationship. And then also for like a trust standpoint, it's like, I can trust you. And so I had to set a boundary of giving her own boundary. Like you can have fun, you can go do these, and I trust you to do those things. And so, but it was kind of like it's kind of a weird boundary to set, but it was something that for me was needed to be able to say, hey, I want to give you that freedom to be able to do what you need to do because I trust everything that you're going to do. Like you can go out, you can go, hang out with your friends. And I feel like that boundary.
That boundary comes with communication though.
Exactly. It does. It does because you have to understand the other person, right?
Yes.
And so, but that was some. I mean, there's like you said, there's different levels of it, but I think they're important because you personally, we need them to be able to manage the expectation and know what we're gonna get out of it, right? What we need out of a relationship, what we need out of friendship, and how to protect ourselves and our energy.
I think to a certain degree, your boundaries might shift a little bit. You can have hard lines like you with the physical, but there are certain points where, as you're growing, you need to adjust the boundary accordingly. Still, you can still have it, but you need to adjust it accordingly. Obviously, at that those two are pretty. I don't see a whole lot of adjustment needed or could be happening, but there are adjustments in it. I think if needed, but there are certain ones that you have to lay down and be there is, that there this does not happen in this relationship. Period. Like obviously cheating, stepping out, stuff like that.
Of course, of course.
That all comes with communication. If it's, hey, I want to go do this, but it's, as long as there's communication, that boundary might be able to be okay. That's on the border of your boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But that's marriage. That's not fully what we're talking about here. But that's what you have to communicate. See, we always come back to something from the previous one. Communication.
Yeah.
You got to communicate, and with any of them, like friends, those ones set pretty hard, in my opinion, because there's not a whole lot to that one. If you have to decide if they want to be in your life or not, that's a boundary you have to set, and same with family. I think family's the hardest one for me. Just thinking about it. Friends are pretty easy because it's just, at the end of the day, if you want to still be my friend, then you'll figure yourself out. And if I want to be around you, I'll make the effort. So,
well, yeah, I think family, because you grow up with them.
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt them, right? And like I said, I think sometimes for myself, I know boundaries were like almost like a negative, like it was had a negative perception in my head of like what a boundary meant. It was almost like you weren't being nice or you were being selfish in an aspect. For me, that was what I thought of it was initially that's why I feel like I never really did them. And so, also, a boundary can be set where you're always saying yes, you're a yes man, or you're losing time out of your day and putting your priorities in jeopardy because you keep saying yes to everybody else. So you have to maybe start setting a boundary where you can say no to somebody, a family member or a friend, and say, no, I got another commitment. I have to. So you overcommit yourself and then you burn out.
And then there's nothing left.
Exactly.
I think the problem that I see with the family one is we grow up in a culture, specifically when we were growing up, it was always, this is your family. Like this, these are the people you're always going to rely on. Well, when you start creating your own family, those are the people you focus on most. And I've heard it from multiple people, that cutting family off is the hardest thing, but sometimes it's what you need to do to protect your marriage too. Mm-hmm. And that's the boundary that becomes the hardest, is where do you find that line that you finally say, look, I love you, but I'm no longer communicating with you. Has nothing to do, you're still my family, but I need this line in the sand drawn. Mm-hmm. We were talking with some friends, and they told us some crazy stories that, that's their story to tell, and I'm not going to get into it, but it blew me away. But they finally did. And I could tell when they were telling us the story about them setting their boundaries, that when they set that boundary, it changed how they were as a person, because they stood up for themselves and said, this is my boundary. I'm done. Kind of the same thing. I love you, but we are done.
Yeah, and it's important to do that.
It is.
And I think that's where people have to look at what a boundary is. And like I said, I keep going back to it, but it's because it's a mindset thing. You really have to look at it it's something that's protecting yourself and others, because eventually that burnout or that yes to everything or whatever the story is that's happening with that lack of boundary, you're not going to be able to show up for others. You'll be burned out. You'll be upset. that know a lot of the times in my younger years when I was saying yes to everybody else and wasn't setting that boundary, whether it be with friends and then, not also having the boundary. So the boundaries can overlap, right? And the only reason I can talk about this because I know that this is something that I did. But if I had a lack of boundary in setting my friendships apart from, being able to go hang out and drink and party and stuff like that, and then being in a relationship with Tay and then setting a boundary like, yeah, I'm going to go do this tomorrow or we're going to go hang out. And because of my lack of communication and my lack of boundary setting, like I can't say no. Now I have, a lunch with Tay and then I have a hangout with my friends at 2. And then I have, all these different things that are laid out because my lack of boundary to be able to say, hey, I'm a little bit overbooked today. I'd love to help you, but I can't. And so that lack of boundary really, kind of flowed into each other. And then you show up for a lunch with my wife and I'm not fully engaged because I'm thinking of what I have to do in the next hour. And so, all these different things flow into it and then you're burned out and then, you're like, then you're unhappy. And then you blame everybody else. Well, like, well, they had to tell me that they needed help and they always are always moving and I'm always the only one that's helping them and all these different excuses. But the ultimate answer is that you just lack boundary.
Yep.
You lack the ability and not the ability, but the want to set a boundary to say, hey, I love you, but I actually got something already booked that day. I don't think it's gonna work, and that's just what it needs to be. It's if anybody were to excuse me, if anybody were to ever be like, how dare you not help me or how dare you say no to me, that's a way different conversation because everybody should be okay with like, hey, I'm a bit overbooked today. I'd love to help, but it's just not going to happen
tomorrow. We had a set of boundaries starting this even.
Yeah.
Even with each other and with everything, we set the standard, which was the boundary. We set the time, we set the communication boundary, we set all that up. That this is the boundary. This is what happens. If not, we're done.
Right.
We're not going to do it. And we needed that.
Mm-hmm.
We found that out very fast for a different reason. But
yeah.
It's setting those boundaries protects you, yourself, what you're doing, and makes things work more smoothly depending on where it's at. I've set some boundaries at work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really, really hard to set when you rely on working in a team. But I had to set certain boundaries and I had to be forthcoming with everybody there. Hey, this is the boundary. I am not doing this. Like, I don't want to do this. Don't make me do this. Like, because it's going to affect the way I work.
Right.
And it sucks because that shouldn't, it's hard to say that into a work environment. It's hard to even say that here in an environment we're trying to grow, but that's what I needed to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I can't continuously put myself in those situations like you're talking about where it's taking more energy than necessary to deal with it.
Right. Well, also, too, I think it's something that is important to learn as you go, as you're growing up, and then hopefully it flows into your adult life because I can think back as even in my high school days and stuff like that. Before that, I was really bad, in elementary and junior high on setting boundaries. But then as I got older and were introduced around certain friends, it was important to set. I don't, like I said, and go back to this because I don't really like to play, with especially with friends, as you could tell, like I don't like tackle you and I know some friendships are like that and smack each other and kind of talk ish to each other. You know what I mean? Oh, you're a da da da. I don't really like to play like that. I used to, but then I think when you start that kind of in amongst friendships and groups and stuff, sometimes it can get a little out of hand. And I don't think and especially for myself, I'm not really always in the mood to kind of be talked like that. So I'm so I had to set a boundary, and be like, hey man, not with us because we just never have been that way, but in the past, like I had to be like, hey man, like, I don't really play like that. That's not how I get down. I don't like you calling me because it's calling me like, hey, what's up, bitch? Da, da, da. That's just was common amongst our friends group, and it never really meant anything other than really just talking shit to each other. But there was a few friends just like, hey man, like I don't play like that. That's not what I do. And but it was important for me to set that because I feel like it was a lack of respect from people that I didn't even know. And so I think it's that standard, it's that boundary of setting like, hey, like we won't cross this. Like that's my boundary to you. And then, if it's not improving, then I would just think, oh, okay, I'm not fucking with that person no more. You know what I mean? And so,
because I think there's a real difference, though. You're on to something here. There's a real difference between like, we'll tease each other a little bit here and there, but never like, oh, you're being such a bitch today.
Yeah.
It's
and
like,
if we ever say it, it's like it's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But we've built the relationship on the boundary of trusting each other and knowing how each other works without even fully saying it either. Sometimes the boundaries don't need to be said because they're just there already. We knew this going in.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's noticed, but you're brown. So every now and then, weird, huh? Every now and then say something and you'll just crack off with what? 'Cause I'm brown?
Yeah.
But that's different because I'm not like, oh, you're I've never degraded you in any way that way.
Not at all.
And I never would. One, that's totally disrespectful, and two, that's not who I am. That's a boundary I set with myself long before this. Like I'm not gonna be that person. Like I'm not that person.
Right.
That everybody has every race.
It's not your character.
Yeah. It's not. I'm not negative towards one race, one gen. It doesn't matter. There's shitty people in this world. Just to throw that out there, it doesn't matter what you are. But to tease like that's you saying it to me. That's not me being like, oh yeah, you're. It's because you're brown. Whatever. That's totally different than you setting that boundary. If you set that boundary, hey, don't say this. I would never say something intentionally.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I've never been one because there's days to be like, oh yeah, what's up, bitch? Like, there's a few friends here and there but we don't talk all that often either.
Yeah.
And even if we do, it's rarely that way anyways, because we both have that personality that one day you can just tell, and it's that, I'm the person where generally you can tell if I'm not in the mood for something pretty freaking quick.
Right.
And most people don't mess with me when I'm in that mood.
Yeah.
Because they know, it's probably best to just keep my
we'll get a
mouth
different
shut.
reaction out of it today. Yeah.
I mean, we talk a lot of smack at work, but again, there's times where like, okay, we're done. Like,
right.
I can tell when it's too much or this or that, kind of a thing. But it's different. We have those boundaries set that we know when to kind of stop.
Right.
Even without saying them, we know, hey, he's really not in the mood. Like, probably should leave him alone a little bit more or whatever. But there's some boundaries you have to set hard, and there's some that come with just time of knowing people too, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think your friends, you can read them, right? You can kind of know, like you said, you can catch that vibe, or you can catch the energy that's kind of coming off of them.
Yeah, and coworkers. I mean, you're with them
all day, 8-10 hours a day, and so you kind of know their mannerisms and their gestures, and you're like, oh, okay, he's pissed off today. I'm not gonna mess with him today. But I think it's important to just set. For me, it was important to set that boundary, with my friends, because I think, especially when you start growing your friends group, and especially in high school, right? People come around that you don't really know, and just start kind of coming around. I think that's how you can get thrown in this box, or everybody thinks that they can do that type of stuff. At least that's what was my mindset in the day. Back in the day, it was like, if everybody thinks they can do that to me, then some random dude's gonna think he can do it to me, and that's not
Yeah.
That's not okay. Like nobody's gonna come up to me that I don't know and say a certain word and think that it's gonna be okay to just do it, and I'm gonna be like, oh hey, what's up, buddy? That just never was my mindset. So
Well, and I think going off of that, I think there's a lot of boundaries you create with certain people, and when they're bringing new people in, they show how to act. Like,
mm-hmm.
To a degree, they keep some of the stuff back until they're kind of there. But
Right.
as a new person coming in, you can't go straight to that like mentality. It doesn't work because you
Right.
don't have those boundaries set up. You can't do that.
Right. No, that's true. And I think with boundaries in itself, I think it's important to start, setting those as early as possible with anybody. And really everybody should have a boundary with somebody, whether it be emotionally or an actual physical thing that you like, hey, like I can't do that. I can't. A lot of it's just saying no. That's what I've always found is like my hardest thing is the ability to say no to certain things. That was like the biggest hindrance back in the day. I can't say no to this because I feel like I want to hurt their feelings. But the more that you can actually do that, the better, and the more actual like flow you'll have in your life. Like, okay, I can get this done. People understand where I'm at. I think people appreciate that a little bit more too. If you're realistic and just say, hey, I can't do that, then you agree and say, hey, yes, I'm going to do that. And then you don't show up,
Yeah.
or you show up late, or all these other things. And then like that, I feel like that's a worse perception of you, of who you are, than just a no. You know what I mean?
That's a boundary I have to like. I've had to set more than once with people. Not saying more than once with a certain person, but just more than once when people are like, "Hey, I'll be there at this time," and I'm like, "I don't care if you are. Like, this is when I'm showing up. Like, this is my boundary for myself. I am showing up this time. Oh, I'll be there. Don't worry." And then they don't show up, and then they're like, "Oh, da 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 da," and then the next time they're like, "Well, I'll be there." Okay, you one, you ruined my trust, and two, I don't care. Like if I needed you that bad, I would tell you. This is my I'm talking about, I mean, work's one of them and we were talking about something else. I can't remember what the wife and I were talking about, but same thing. Set it up and we're like, "Hey, we'll be here at this time." They're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'll be there."
Mm-hmm.
Don't show up.
Well, even look
Show up late.
The podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like if it's at my house and I was like, hey dude, like be here at X, let's be here at 5. Okay, say you're showing up and I'm not, ready to go, or I'm not, I'm still in bed, and I'm like, oh dude, and this is like a constant week thing. The easy thing, and I feel like in the past, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, I would have had a hard time to be like actually say something like, hey man, like I'm showing up. Things aren't like, I appreciate you doing all this stuff, but it's not ready. So I would just hold it in and just be pissed off at the person. And in my head, be like, well, I can't, this guy's unreliable. Well, the boundary needs to be like that conversation and saying, hey man, like I can't keep showing up for you if you're not going to show up. You know what I mean?
Weird. This sounds really familiar.
And so, that's just it flows in everything, and like I said, I don't think we've had to have that conversation because we went through an experience where we kind of had an understanding, right? Like
we did. We had the conversation, but it wasn't about us.
Mm-hmm.
But we had the conversation together.
Right.
And one of the things that has helped me and you is respect for each other.
Mm-hmm.
The mutual respect for that boundary.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was times where I was like, shit, I'm going to be a minute or two late. And instead of just showing up that minute or two late, I don't care if it's a minute late. I sent you a message a couple minutes early, said, hey, I fucked up. I'm running a little behind.
Right.
I will be there. And same with the time that you did sleep through your alarm. You text me the same thing. Oh, bro, dude, I fucked up. Like,
yeah.
And we didn't lollygag about it. It wasn't like, oh, I messed up, That time it was like 10 minutes late or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and you were like, shit, dude, I messed up. but you were ready to go in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're like, bam, I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's like that's the boundary of showing up on time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. It's like when work sets that boundary.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah.
I'm not one to be late to that boundary. The one time I got the phone call. Dude, are you alive? Are you okay? Did something happen to you? Shit, apparently my alarm didn't go off.
Yeah.
But it's that same thing. I rushed to get ready. It ruined my whole morning. I didn't get like coffee, or at the time I think I was drinking coffee. I'm not going to stop and get coffee. I'm going straight from work or from house to work. There's no stop in between. I'm already late. I already screwed up. I'm going to get there.
Right.
As quickly as I can. I don't mess around when it comes to that stuff.
That is kind of funny that you say that, and this might be a tangent, but one of those things where, yeah, people will show up late, and like, I can't believe I'm late, but then like, you have a Starbucks in your hand. Like, what? Like, you don't see the how moronic you look. Like,
yeah. I don't.
I do.
It drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing ever, dude.
Drives me nuts.
No, man. I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say there's this weird. The boundary that I don't keep when it comes to being on time are certain like parties and stuff, because there's times where you'll go to parties and 90% of people won't show up for like an hour later, which is ridiculous. It's dumb, but I'm still not. I generally try not to be that person that shows up more than like 5-10 minutes late, if at all possible.
Right.
Generally, I'm 5 minutes early, and we're like, shit, we're early. There's nobody here, and sometimes we don't fully know everybody that's going to be at this party because it was an invite from somebody else or something, and you're like, shit, they're not even here.
Yeah, I don't want to be the first person there and then not know exactly.
Yeah, but at the same point, I'm like, well, I'm going to be as close to on time as I can. If it's like, oh, it's open invite, just come, anytime after this time. A little bit different. You don't have a hard boundary. It's not like, hey, this starts at this time.
Right.
You don't show up to a movie an hour late. The boundary set for the movie to start at this fucking time. Like, there's weird analogies for boundaries. No, it's all the same concept.
You're onto it.
And set it hard.
Yes.
When you're setting a boundary, you need to be pretty hard about it. If that boundary needs to change, you need to communicate why, and it needs to be a mutual thing for that boundary to move. Which is probably more what I was trying to get to with the marriage part. If you guys are growing and hey, this circle's expanding, for instance, I don't know, like there's people that it's like you can only go hang out with the girls. Like, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. But it needs to be, in my opinion, an open communication. Mm-hmm. Hey, they invited me, but their husbands are coming. Like, do you want to come too?
Right.
That's a communication boundary where you can be like, well, I have previous obligations, but yeah, go ahead. Or, oh, there's a bunch of random guys going. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable about that. Like, what kind of party is this you're going to again? Like, but all in all, it comes down to communication. If that boundary needs to adjust or move, you need to communicate it. Mm-hmm. But some need to be very, very solid and don't move.
Yeah, well, I think the boundary that I was trying to explain especially within our marriage was, one of the things that we really set was like, it's okay to hang out with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't judge anybody's relationship. I really don't. I don't know their past. I don't know how they built that. But at the end of the day, I've been through enough where I know that for me and for my partners to be able to have a decent relationship is something that can flourish, is the ability to give them
space,
the space to do those things, to hang out with friends and whether it be guy or girls, really, to me it don't make a difference, right? I have enough trust. But yeah, there is, like I said, everybody's got their own dynamic.
But that's their boundary they set.
Exactly, for whatever reason.
Yes.
And that's a great way to segment into a boundary can start a conversation.
Yes.
And start a communication that may be needed to understand the other person.
Yes.
On why they're setting this boundary, why it's important to them. Just because they said it doesn't necessarily mean it's like, yes, you need to respect it for the fact that they're setting that, but you can have a conversation like, well, tell me like a little bit more about that. Like, why is that important
yeah.
to you?
Yeah.
Then guess what? You're actually communicating in a relationship.
Yeah,
You're actually
you're
growing with each other.
you're opening up. You're going deeper into your relationship to figure out why. You know, like for me, a one-on-one with somebody of the different gender, not really cool.
no.
You know, but if it's a group like, hey, I'm going to hang out with Sally and a couple of her friends and her boyfriend's bringing a couple of his friends, like still gets a little weird, but what? Yeah, that's a little bit of a but that's again, you open the communication. Where's this boundary set for tonight with this group of friends?
Right.
Kind of a scenario, but that's different. Like agree. You need to have space. You need to grow. If you're going to hang out and with a group and y'all meet up with some other people, yeah, whatever. Like again, it comes back to communication. If you guys are willing to be open and talk about it and be honest about what your boundaries are, even for the night,
Right.
whether you make them for the night or forever, there needs to be boundaries set to a certain point.
Right.
Well, to any points, they need to be set.
They have to.
Yeah.
It has to, it's an important part of, I think, and I think what I was trying to hint at, what you were hitting at earlier, that it kind of came into play was it's funny when you start looking at boundaries, because a lot of the times we don't think of those things as boundaries. We're just like, oh, this is just it's just what it is. Your movie analogy, that is a boundary that the company set. Like you show up, we're like, it's not like, they can easily say like, oh, well, we have to wait for everybody to be in the theater before we start a movie. No, their theory, their standard, their boundaries. The movie starts at X. We got previews up until this point, and then you show up. If not, the movie's going.
Yeah, you paid us. We don't care.
Yeah, and so a lot of times there are boundaries that we deal with on a daily basis that we're not really looking as like, maybe we see it as a standard or this is just what it is, but that is a boundary that somebody set, whether it be a company, a personal, a friend, in a relationship, with your kids, whatever. But kids is a whole nother story too. Like, you just, well, let me finish this. So the reason that I say that is because that there's boundaries that people aren't noticing, is because I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't know how to set a boundary, or I don't know, really where to start. Well, you start by just identifying what is important to you, and for me, it was like, what really is bothering me.
Yeah.
What kind of messes up my day or kind of makes me a little bit irritated. And is it something that I could set a boundary for? But is it related to somebody else? And a boundary can be with yourself too.
Yeah.
Now, my boundary was, I'm not going to drink every freaking weekend. I can't do it. Taylor set that boundary initially in a relationship, but a lot of it was like, okay, I have to set this own boundary for myself, because it's easy to be like, I can sneak a drink or two here, or if it comes to weight loss and kind of working out, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to set a boundary with your friends and be like, hey, man. A good example was, I don't know if you consider it as a boundary, but when you were doing your 75 hard, you had a party you could have gone to. I feel like that's like a boundary. That's a standard that you'd set for yourself. Like, do I really want to put myself in this position? I mean, I'm sure I could do good, but it's like you have to find these, and they're not like you said, they're flexible boundaries. They're not things that you have to hold up and all the time. Maybe there is some, but a lot of these can be like, oh, today I need space. Today, my boundaries, I'm going to tell the kids like, hey, Dad needs 10 minutes, just give me 10 minutes today, or whatever it might be. And so I say all that to say this, that the boundaries, that we're setting them, but you need to really identify what's important to you and set that boundary with wherever it lies, with somebody, with yourself, with work.
Yeah.
So
they I guess ultimately they sound like a standard, but it is a boundary. And yeah, like you said, some are flexible, some have to be set in stone. Some of the, if you're cutting ties with friends and family, those have to be pretty set in stone. So you have to be pretty serious about those. Those are probably the hardest ones to set, because like I said, we've grown up with, this is your family. You need to be, no, you need to worry about yourself. And if they're causing harm to you, You need to set that boundary and say, I'm done. You're doing more damage than good in my life. I love you. I will always love you, but I can't have you in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And if they decide to change, that's where you could possibly change that boundary. But ultimately, you have to, there's certain ones you have to set really hard. Because, yeah, 75 hard. You set boundaries. I'm going to stay within these parameters, these boundaries of my food or my water and what I'm allowing myself to do.
Association.
Association. Like, because, yeah, when I went to the birthday parties and stuff, my boundary was I'm not eating cake. I'm not eating the sweets. I'm not eating the candy. I'm not eating this.
And just put in that situation, like if I was, say I invited you and come on, Dustin, dude, have that beer, bro. Come on, man. Oh, dude, like, oh, look, man, I cooked all this stuff for you, dude. Like,
yeah,
why would you, you easily could be like, well, look, man, like, I appreciate you inviting me, but that's just not what I'm about. And if you keep like pressing it, then, I'm going to take off, man.
Luckily, everybody that I set the boundary with was great while I was doing it. They were great. They never, we went to one party where there was drinking and food, and, my wife stood next to me, and she kept that boundary with me.
Mm-hmm.
No, I won't drink tonight. You're not drinking. I'm not drinking. We'll keep it. It's fine. I don't need to drink anyways.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, right in the beginning, we're like, yeah, I'm on 75 hard, and they're like, oh, that's awesome. Like, congratulations. Like, you're not drinking tonight? Nope. Okay, cool. Great. There's food if you want food. There's water in the fridge. Do what you got to do. Everybody I associate with, at least,
right,
is great about holding up the boundaries that I give them. Hey, I'm not doing that. Yeah, cool. That's fine. Hey, I'm doing this. These are my boundaries while I'm doing it. Yeah, no problem. Those are the kind of people. I never had anybody pushing against me.
Right.
Everybody was like, "Oh, you gotta go drink. You gotta come on. Let's go drink. Let's go do this. Let's go get." No, I'm good. I have the boundary with some of my friends too. Hey, we're going to the bar. I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't really need to go to the bar. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'd rather you come to the house and let's chill.
Right.
Well, I don't, it's too expensive to go to a bar. I don't want to spend the food. I don't want to buy the food. I want to buy the drinks.
Yeah. I think one thing too is like people sometimes unknowingly will try to take a boundary from you.
Yeah.
I think it's important to know when that boundary is being crossed and set and reset that boundary. I won't go into specifics, but there there is a situation where we've had to set boundaries, and we feel like there was a point where we allowed that person to continue to push that boundary further and further, like from where we'd originally set it, and at some point you have to reset and reestablish that original boundary. And it's hard. Most do well. Some people just don't like to be told no, or they like to be in control of situations. So I think it's important to always know that just because somebody's crossed or broken your boundary doesn't ever mean that you can't reinstate that boundary. So I feel like sometimes, especially, I'll hit on this because I really don't care. In my original marriage, there was infidelity, right? So, that was always a hard boundary for me, obviously, right? And I don't
generally most people have that as a boundary.
Generally, yeah. For the most part, I'd always told myself, like, if that ever happened in a relationship, serious relationship, that it's a no-go. Well, I stuck around for years after, at least 2 years after I actually known that this was, happening. Now, there was some boundaries that I had set after that point, after I'd actually found out, because out of protection for myself and just being smart of the situation, if you pick up what I'm putting down. But,
yes,
I set certain boundaries, but I I was allowing these things to happen, and I was knowingly kind of knowing, and then at some point in my head, I was like, well, shoot, I feel like I'm too far, like where I'm too far into like this boundary, like we're so far from it now, that I was kind of feeling lost. Like I was like, well, really, I don't know how to recenter, how to kind of come back to where that boundary is. And the boundary was set, and then I found out it was at some point broken again. And then at that point, it was, I'm done. Like, I'm leaving. Like, I can't do this anymore. So I say that to say, like, your boundaries can be broken, and it can go a long time, until, you realize, like, oh, shoot, like, I've been bad about this. But it's okay, because you can always go back and say, I'm like, this is hard. You pass it again. Like, I'm done. Like, that's okay.
But that's also where communication comes in. Because if you're not communicating, hey, I've noticed this boundary's moving. Can we talk about why? Like, why are you pushing it? And this is why I feel bad, why I feel the way I do about it. Then you can come to an understanding. Oh, okay. Obviously the infidelity doesn't really, there's not really there's not really a move or a conversation with that. I mean, I guess there kind of is, but at the end of the day, if that's not what you want, you can't do it.
Right.
Same thing, like, at the end of the day, if you set that boundary with your friends or your family and they come to you and like, hey, I've changed. Like, okay, I might give you a chance, but let's see. It's like we talked about. We dealt with this right at the beginning. We set a boundary, and we had to reinstate that boundary, and we came up with a, hey, this is where we're at. This is the line in the sand. And at that point, we're like, whoop, got to go on to the next. We got to move on.
Right.
We can't continue to do this. I mean, it's you can't, because I'm reading the screen here. I'm like looking over. I'm like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it does cause, it says time management, productivity. It causes all that to go down, because if you're late, we'll talk about being late here in this boundary of being late. You're losing productivity. You're losing your time management sucks. Like, come on, guys. Like, it's a boundary that's set. Like, when you set, be here at this time, that's a boundary you should try to you should stick to.
100%.
It's disrespectful. It's rude. We'll just go throw those out there real fast.
Well, it just shows a lack of respect.
Yeah.
And anybody that's ever got anywhere close to me, respect is number one on my list. And when that kind of starts kind of drifting off, it's hard to make. You can't make people respect you, right? You can set a boundary that this, either if we don't, there's a lack of respect, then there's no reason for me to really foster or grow this relationship, right? And that's just the reality. Like, unfortunately, and it may sound cold, but it is what it is. Like, to me, it's my boundary. Like, I was disrespected. I feel like I was disrespected a lot as a kid, and I never had the ability to be able to get that. And so now as an adult, like, that's just that's a hard boundary for me. So.
Well, and you gain confidence too by setting boundaries.
100%.
I've noticed. Mm-hmm. You start gaining confidence and respect for yourself, which people can see, they can feel, they can see, so they start respecting you and respecting what you're doing because you're setting these boundaries.
That's true. 100%.
What do you got for them?
Challenges? Oh, let's see. So, for me, let me think this through. Boundaries. I think for me, I think the first step is identifying that that you're lacking a boundary. I would take, 10 minutes of your time this next week and just really think through of things that are affecting your energy, things that are affecting, really how you're handling certain situations, and see if there's a lack of boundary on your end. And if there is, then you address that boundary.
Pretty much what I was going to say.
Cool.
Just look at your life, readjust if you need to. I mean, if you're the person showing up every now and then late to work, adjust that boundary for yourself. You know, your time management's huge. That's a boundary you need to set with yourself. If anything, start looking at your life and setting boundaries for yourself. Would be the only other thing I'd say.
Love it. Well, man, thank you so much for another great episode, dude. I appreciate you showing up no matter what. So
if there's weird whistling, guys, I'm sorry. These tubes are annoying as fuck.
We love you guys. Thanks again, brother.
Thank you.
See you.